Good morning and welcome to Hardin Life Live. We are the Hardin Daughters, and we are a group of counselors and coaches with Hardin Life resources that are committed to helping you live your best life, both from a biblical and therapeutic perspective. So, we have covered a lot of great topics, but this month our focus is going to be on unhealthy patterns. And Abigail, you wrote a blog that really introduced this whole month for us and why unhealthy patterns are important to look at. Uh, and essentially, they keep us stuck from living that best life that we are wanting to live ourselves and encouraging you that you can also live that way. But unhealthy patterns are patterns. So they're tough. So I would love to hear from you kind of what inspired you to write and just get us started today.
Well, I think when we hear unhealthy patterns, it's easier to see it in someone else's life than our own. And
Yeah.
so I think that if you can even just notice an unhealthy pattern, and let me just kind of define that, it could be a repetitive behavior, it can be a repetitive relationship, it can be a repetitive kind of conflict that you're always kind of facing and brewing. And you might be thinking, do I always have to learn this lesson? Or I've been here before. Why can't I get past this? Some people think that they attract the situation into their lives, but maybe they're not even looking about what they're doing in their behavior, that it starts to lead to a consequence of it. For instance, it's that I'm thinking negatively. I'm always going to be depressed. And it's like, how do we get out of the pattern of thinking negatively and then feeling depressed? You're just stuck.
Mhm.
Or if you're in a relationship, someone is unfaithful, and yet you don't want to let go of that relationship when it's obvious that person doesn't have the same loyalty to you and you don't even know why, but that's still what you gravitate to. That is something that we want to start to look at. That's what I would call it, an unhealthy behavior. You're not getting to fully be yourself, or you're in a toxic situation, whether that's a relationship or a way of thinking. And so this is like, it can go really broad. This month's topic is broad, but the first step we have to do is to notice, what could our pattern be? What is something that we've seen in our life time and time again?
Okay, so you're saying in order to notice what our unhealthy patterns are, first notice our behaviors. What are we doing? I loved a specific example that you gave in the blog about people that naturally have just more anxiety and more worry, and they're watching the news all the time. And it's like that behavior actually perpetuates that feeling, and then you get stuck in more of a pattern of worry.
Yes. And I think that just in this day and age, with everything that we've done with pandemic, with just all the uncertainty in our lives, it is, for somebody who doesn't even struggle with anxiety, they're probably going to struggle with anxiety with a year like that we've been experiencing. And so those who've already had a struggle with anxiety, it's almost like an unhealthy pattern wants to stay. That's familiar. And so we're going to look for things to fuel our behavior. I think that that's what we even try to help our clients, with counseling and coaching, is identify, what are you, it's like, what are you trying to change, but what gets you stuck? What are even your thoughts ruminating on? And then that can even help us understand where the pattern lies. For
Mhm.
instance, in a relationship, we rather be, in a toxic relationship than be alone.
Yeah.
And so we have to realize why we still stay stuck in a lot of unhealthy patterns is it's doing a good thing for us. It seems better than not having it,
Mhm.
which is the scary part, because it's like, it's better to have anxiety, um, to feel like I'm doing something, that I'm being proactive, that I'm being knowledgeable, and I can prepare for the worst situation, versus just living in trusting the Lord, facing the unknown as it comes, and enjoying the present.
Mm.
It seems like, okay, enjoying the present. Well, I'm not going to enjoy the present if I'm not prepared for the worst situation. Then we start to feel out of control. And so getting to, I think about unhealthy patterns a lot, is when you start to kind of tease them out. a lot of the things that are out there in the world that are trying to like help our unhealthy patterns, or it's like, you know, it's social media, you can scroll through it. The toxic relationship, you're not alone. There's a positive kind of intention to each thing, but really that's kind of just treating a symptom of feeling alone, treating a symptom of feeling out of control. We want to go back to the source. And so one of my favorite quotes, she's a therapist, and you can read more in the blog, but we repeat what we don't repair. And so that's kind of a root of a pattern. So a lot of us don't want to face our past, or we don't even think our past has a huge influence on our present. But looking at unhealthy patterns, it probably started somewhere in our past. That was where the wound was.
Yeah. When I think about some of my unhealthy patterns that I've had and had to face, one is when I've hurt someone, and whether intentional or not, I've hurt them, and I immediately want to fix it. It is like a compulsive behavior for me to try to fix it instead of tuning in and listening to what that person needs from me in order to repair. And it might just simply be me taking ownership and apologizing. But because I go from just like feeling that hurt that I've caused to doing something about it, I miss out on the relationship. And it actually can be quite frustrating for the other person because they're like, what are you doing? I don't need that from you. But it all goes back to my anxiety of being afraid of feeling rejected from people. And I think that, what you're saying is like, if we can get to the root, if we can get to the why of these unhealthy behaviors, then we really have a chance of healing them. And at the same time, those unhealthy behaviors are there for a reason. We're used to them, and it's a lot more comfortable to just keep repeating it because there is an aspect of it that's worked for us. There's a quote that I have heard that I think it might even be by Dr. Henry Cloud, who's a family favorite. But when the pain, we actually grow when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of changing. And it's like it takes work and it's painful either way, but it's like, is this ultimately really working for me in the long run? And I think that's what you're doing with your blog, is you're wanting to give us all a pause to just think, are these unhealthy behaviors serving you in the long run?
Well, and you got to notice, that's number one. And so of course, this month we're taking it through in different kinds of unhealthy patterns. But I kind of think too, we've talked about before, one of my favorite things to talk about is an emotional addiction. And that is kind of what I think that we have all touched on. But we hear emotional addiction, we're like, what? But if we're even craving some of the same emotions, that we can have an outburst, or we're trying to fix things so it's positive, versus like getting to sit with, how do you fix something without doing? You listen, and then you go to the source of feeling rejected. So like, you were able to recognize your source and not just try to do the symptom of just fix it so I don't have to feel these things.
Right.
And so that's really hard for us all to detect. It's hard for us to even see what emotions we gravitate towards, and even retrieving, where do we start feeling that emotion? Mm-hmm. And so start to be thinking, when it comes to your unhealthy patterns, say you're in a toxic relationship. Well, where did you learn relationships? What are you gaining from it? Think about your anxiety. Where did it really start with? Did you have an anxious parent that you were trying to always think, or an unpredictable parent? Usually things we have to look 12 and under. Ages 12 and under is probably where we started to get our sources to our unhealthy patterns.
Absolutely. And just a reminder, God calls us out of those layers of self-protection, of patterns of self-soothing, of those emotional addiction, because he called us to a life of trust and a life of faith and of restoration. And when we're trying to hold on, we miss out on the life that he has for us. And so I love what you said. The first step is noticing, it's awareness. And so just taking a deeper look, even today, I'm just willing to see what my patterns are when I feel uncomfortable or sad or whatever. What do I do? So definitely check out Abigail's blog. She nails this topic, and stick with us for the rest of the month. We are going to be unpacking it in different dimensions throughout September. So we are looking forward to sitting with you next week. Thanks, guys.